Now we're on Daf Chavtes Amud Beis, and we're further analyzing the machlokas between the Tanakam and Rabbi Yehuda about who comes first in Pidyon Ben, the son or the father, if he only has enough money for one of them. And Rabbi Yirmiyah is going to say, "Akol mobish kol heicha deleka el chamesh sloim hu kodev livno." In fact, even Rabbi Yehuda agrees that if there's only 5 slime in the piggy bank, then he should be poda himself. That's the ikar chiyuv. Not the way we understood it, that according to Rabbi Yehuda, the ikar chiyuv is on the father vis-a-vis his son, but rather on the person himself, my taima. Mitzvah de gufei adif. Whenever you have a mitzvah that's incumbent upon the gufa adam, that's the ikar mitzvah. When it's a mitzvah vis-a-vis somebody else, then that's the tofel. So then what is the machlokas between Rabbi Yehuda and the Tanakama? Ki pligi heicha de ikar chamesh mishubadim and chamesh b'nei chorim. So what happens in the following scenario? The father sold a piece of karka that was valued, marketed at 5 slot. Now, the buyer of that piece of karka that's worth 5 slot for the father bought a karka with a lien on it, L-I-E-N, a shiban on it, because there's a shiba to be paid to the father. And that's because the chiyuv of the father to be paid himself was already chal before he sold the karka. So at the time of the sale, the buyer picked up a piece of karka that has shibud on it. However, that same karka has no shibud vis-a-vis the pidyon of his ben, because at the time of the sale, his son was not chayav in pidyon ben. Either the son was not old enough to be chayav, etc. So now the father has 5 slime in his piggy bank, and there's 5 slime that's mishubad that was sold as a piece of karka with a shibud on it to a buyer. And here in this case, we're going to have a machlokas between the Tanakam and Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda savar milva tichsiv batorah kiksuva b'shtardam. In other words, any chiyuv mama, like for example, the chiyuv of the father to be poda his son by giving 5 sloim to the Kohen, is as if it was written in a shtar. What does a shtar do? A shtar is of like a public knowledge, and it generates a shibud. So the mocher knows that he's getting a shibud. For example, let's say the mocher had taken a loan with a shtar. So that shtar makes his loan and his obligation to repay that loan public knowledge. And therefore, when the buyer buys the karka from the lover, he understands that the karka is mishubedes to guarantee the chov that the lover owes to the malva. So too, says Rabbi Yehuda, any chov, any monetary obligation that's written in the Torah itself, it's as if it's written in the shtar. It's public knowledge, and therefore it generates a shibud. So therefore, all of the nechasim of the father now, according to Rabbi Yehuda, have a shibud for the purpose of piron chov, namely paying the 5 slum to the Kohen on behalf of his son to be paid to his son. Therefore, in our particular case, where we're discussing a case where the father sold his nechasim before the son was born, and therefore there was no chiyuv to be paid to him. So at the time that he's born, when this child is born, and the chiyuv of pidyon haben is chal, there are no nechasim in the rishus of the father. And there's no way that the father could collect from the lekuchos in order to come up with the 5 slime to be paid to his son, because there was no shibud on the karka that was sold before the birth of the son. On the other hand, by contrast, in terms of the father's obligation to be paid to himself, that obligation was chal before he sold the karka. Therefore, there's a shibud. So now, argues Rabbi Yehuda, there's a very beautiful option of being mekayim both the father's personal chiyuv and his chiyuv vis-a-vis his son. How? He has 5 slime in his bank account. He will use that to be pod his son. And he will pay up his obligation of 5 slime to the Kohen to be pod himself by confiscating the karka of 5 slime from the lokeach. Ad kan shitas Rabbi Yehuda, very smooth. But Rabbanon, Chachamim disagree with Rabbi Yehuda at one fundamental point, and that is Savri de Milva de Ksiva de Baraisa Lav Kiksu B'Shtardo. A chiyuv moment that was formulated by the Torah itself is not like a chiyuv that's written in a shtar that could be collected from shibudim, from a shubadim, and you can only collect a chiyuv moment that's written in the Torah from Bnei Chorin. And therefore, the Kohen could not possibly be paid his 5 slime by collecting the karka that was sold by the father, even for the father's own chiyuv. And therefore, the only possibility here is to pay from Bnei Chorin. But there's only 5 slime in the bank. Hilkach mitzvah de gufei adif. Therefore, the father will be pod himself, and he will not be pod his son. So whereas Rabbi Yehuda has the option of being pod both himself and his son, the Chacham don't have that option because milva ksu b'Torah, lav kiksu b'shtardam. If right at this moment in time, he has 2 mitzvahs that are obligatory, pidyon haben and lalos l'regel, he doesn't have enough money in the bank to fulfill both mitzvahs. And therefore, podes beno v'achakach ola l'regel. Now, many of the Rishonim say that the reason he's podes beno is because we believe that eventually he will come into money that will supply himself with an option of the mitzvah of aliyah l'regel, so that the halacha podes beno first is only a kedima halacha, but really, essentially, the greater obligation of the two is aliyah l'regel. So again, we're talking, says the Rambam and Tosfos, that there's only enough money in the bank account to be mekayim one of these 2 mitzvahs, and pidyon haben requires 5 slime. Aliyah l'regel needs most for what's called hotzas haderech. And the Shita Lo Noda L'mi points out that we're talking about a person who right now doesn't have the most to be mekayim both mitzvahs. There's no discussion here and no debate between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim on the essential issue of which mitzvah is ikar and is greater than the other, which trumps the other. It's only a question of kedima. And if you take a look at the Brisa, it says v'achakach ola l'regel, and the lashon of the Brisa v'achakach ola l'regel is a proof to the Shita Lo Noda L'mi that we're only talking about a case where he has to decide which comes first. But enoch hinami, if he would know for sure that if he be poda his ben, he would not in any way possibly be able to be ola l'regel, then aliyah l'regel comes first before pidyon haben, according to everybody. So that inherently, aliyah l'regel is a greater mitzvah than pidyon haben, but we're hoping that even after he's pod his ben, he'll still come up with the funds to be ola l'regel. Rabbi Yehuda Omer ola l'regel v'achakach podes beno. That in all cases of kedima, aliyah l'regel comes first when they shazu mitzvah veres, mitzvah eino veres. You know what? He could postpone the mitzvah pidyon haben. The mitzvah pidyon haben emerges after 30 days since the birth of the child, but it goes endlessly until the end of the life. But in the case of aliyah l'regel, quite obviously, it's a mitzvah that has a special time. Gemara says the following: I don't understand the Rabbanon here. Bishlem Rabbi Yehuda Kidomer Taima. Rabbi Yehuda explains why in Dine Kedima aliyah l'regel, which a mitzvah veres, comes before pidyon haben. El Rabbanon Mai Tamayu. the Rabbanan did not explain why they maintain that in Kedima he should begin with Pidyon Haben and use the 5 sloim that he has in his bank account to be paid to his son. And the answer is the Omakra, Kol Bechar Bonecha Tifte, the Hadar, and afterwards in the Seder Apsukim, it says, V'lo Yiro Panai Rekam. So we're talking about the parasha of Bechar, of Pidyon Haben in Shmos Lamed Daled that we mentioned earlier. And after that pasuk, it says, Lo Yiro Panai Rekam, meaning Aliyah L'Regel. So the Torah puts Pidyon Haben first and Aliyah L'Regel second, to darshan and to derive from this that mitzvah's Pidyon Haben gets kedima over the mitzvah of Aliyah L'Regel. Rabbi Yehuda, on the other hand, was not choshesh to this drasha of the Chachamim, and it's quite possible he holds, like the Shita Rav Dimi in Bechoros Tafnun Alpha Mid Beis, that the entire pasuk is addressing Pidyon Haben and not Aliyah L'Regel. Again, you have to see that sugya carefully in Bechoros Nun Aleph. It's also possible Rabbi Yehuda has a Shita in Yerushalmi and Shkolim that ein mukta rucha b'Torah even be'inyan echad. So the machlokes here amongst the Chachamim that even a mitzvah veres, like the case of Aliyah L'Regel, is trumped by Pidyon Haben, even though Aliyah L'Regel is a mitzvah veres. But it doesn't seem that the Rabbanan are making a general rule here. They're only saying it in this case because of the Gzeres HaKosuv in the Seder HaPsukim. He's married to 5 different women, and he has 5 bechoros. Each one is a petarechem. Shechayav liftos kulam tabiloma kol bechor bonecha tivte. The extra word kol teaches us a chayav and Pidyon vis-a-vis each one of his sons. Frekti Gemara Pshita. Why do I need a pasuk for that? Petarechem tola rachmana. Torah says that petarechem is obligated in Pidyon Haben. So then, why do I need a special kol as a reboot? More answers, we had another Gzeres Shava that might lead us to a mistaken conclusion. Neilif b'char minachla. In Pidyon Haben in Shmos Lamed Daled that we mentioned already 3 times, the Torah says b'char banech. Underline the word b'char. In Yerushas Ha'av, in Dvarim Perek Chaf Aleph, the Torah says ki es ha'b'char yakir. Again, the word b'char is therefore based on this Gzeres Shava b'char minachla. We would say malal and reishis ona, just like the din of Yerushas Ha'av. Who gets to be the b'char and gets pishnayim? It's reishis ona. It's the first son of the Av, first child of the Av. Is Afkan, by virtue of this Gzeres Shava, apply the same yardstick and definition to Pidyon Haben, reishis ona, and therefore he's only chayav to be po the reishis ono. There's only one bechor who's reishis ono, who's the first his father. Kamash Malon. Now, even in the Havamina, it doesn't mean that he's not petarechem. The Torah says explicitly that he's petarechem, but it means you need 2 conditions. It's not enough that he's petarechem. You also have to have reishis ono. If you can check off both boxes, then there's a chiyuv of Pidyon Haben. Kamash Malon. The Bryce says, teach us, no, we're not going to use the Gzeres Shava for that. We're going to say that there's an independent chiyuv over petarechem, even if it's not reishis ono. The Brisa says that a father is obligated to lamdo Torah to teach his son Torah minolan. This Gemara is very strange, by the way, because you get the impression that lamdo Torah is a chiyuv d'Rabbanan, but the Gemara learns it from a pasuk. And that certainly indicates that it's a chiyuv d'oraisa. And we're going to see other things on the list. We'll go back for a second to the list. And Nafchav Tesam and Aleph. We have here Lasio Isha, that's certainly d'Rabbanan. Lalamdo Umnus, that's certainly d'Rabbanan. And not only that, the chiyuv of the father to teach Torah to his son is derived from what we call chinuch. Chanoch lenar al pi darko. That's a d'Rabbanan. And yet the Gemara has no hesitations in quoting a pasuk. So it seems like we have to take this brisa and split it into fragments. There's going to be half of the brises referring to mitzvahs d'oraisa that are obligatory on the father vis-a-vis his son, and others are d'rabbanan. So, for example, Hav chayav libnola mula, that's d'oraisa. Liftosa, d'oraisa. L'lamdo Torah, d'oraisa. And then the rest are d'rabbanan. If the father did not teach his son Torah, the son has to teach himself Torah. The poskim want to know at what point is the chiyuv chal on the ben. The Meiri says that the chiyuv is chal on the ben to teach himself Torah only after he reaches gadlus. However, the Rambam at the beginning of Talmud Torah writes that if his father didn't teach him Torah, then he's chayav lamed esatzmo kishe yakir. What does the Rambam mean by kishe yakir? According to the Rav Shulchan Aruch, the Rambam has in mind the shita that we mentioned earlier of the Meiri, that he's not chayav to teach himself only after he reaches gadlus. But then you wonder why the Rambam used the word kishe yakir and not kishe yagdil. So the Einayim L'Mishpat writes that according to the Rambam, from the moment that the ben is royal lahav in mashu lomed, he might be 3 years old, he might be 5 years old. Yachol lamed atzmo, he can learn on his own. He's mechuyev to teach himself, even though all mitzvahs are only obligatory. They only emerge as an obligation when he's 13. The mitzvah Talmud Torah is different. And that's what the Rambam concludes in that very Rambam, Perek Beis Halacha Aleph, Shematzina b'chol mokum shal limud kodem l'maisa, Talmud mevil de maisa. Therefore, even though he's not mitzvah in all mitzvahs, he's already got to know what will be his obligations the moment that boom, the clock strikes 13 years old. How do we know a mother is not obligated to teach her son Torah? If you have your own personal obligation to study Torah, then you're obligated to teach someone else. How do we know that a woman doesn't have a personal obligation to teach herself? To sin, Kol sha'acher mitzvah l'lamdo, mitzvah l'lamed es atzma. Kol she'ein acher mitzvah l'lamdo, ein mitzvah l'lamed es atzma. U'minayin she'ein acher mitzvah l'lamdo. How do we know that others are not obligated to teach her Torah? Tiyom kol limadet Moses b'neichem v'lo b'nei seichem. Torah rabbanan. Hu lilmo Torah b'no lilmo. Who comes first? Let's say he doesn't have enough money to pursue the education of both himself and of his son, very similar to what we saw earlier with regard to Pidyon Ben, is the Tanakama, as we would anticipate, is going to say, Hu konim l'bno, the Iker Chiyuv is on himself to study Torah. So instead of sending his son to yeshiva and paying tuition for yeshiva, he will pay tuition for his own learning, even though his son will get no Torah. Rabbi Yehuda Omer in B'not Zariz u'Memulach v'Talmudim Iskayim b'Yoda B'not Kodma. Rabbi Yehuda says something unbelievable. He says, which is the primary obligation? And that depends upon who would be more matzliach, who would be more successful in his learning. A very intellectual approach here. I don't know what they would say about this in Breslov. I don't know. But basically what he's saying is that we compare the capacity of the father to that of the son. And if the son has a greater capacity, he remembers his Torah, he's able to analyze his Torah and comprehend it on the deeper level compared to his father, therefore B'no Kodma. And that means that the father will do whatever he has to be mefarnes his son, and his son will learn in yeshiva. Again, this sugya requires a lot of iyun. Anyway, Ki Hadar of Yaakov, Raider of Achabar, famous story. Shadri Avula Kamid Abaye. the father sent his son to study at Abai. And when Rav Yaakov went back and Chazila Mechadin Shmaiten, when Rav Yaakov, the son, came back home and his father saw that he doesn't know his learning. I'm sharper than you are. You sit here, you'll get a job, and I'm going to go to the Beis Medrash to study Torah. Shama Abai Dekas. The Abai heard that Rav Acha comes to study Torah because his son Rav Yaakov was not successful. Is Haviyahu Masik Bei Rabbanon the Abai? There was a 7-headed monster in the Beis Medrash, and Chiyavi Aili Bitrain Afil B'Mama Havi Mitzvah. Even when two people came together, and even during the daytime, the daylight hours, he was mazik. Most mazikim are afraid of two people of Rabin, and most mazikim are only mazik by day and not by night. So Abai was looking for an eitzah. How could he pater himself up from this monster? Amalahu, he said to the people of the city, Lo lesiv le inishush pizah. Let's not give anyone achsanya. And what's going to happen is the Rav Acha will have no choice. He's going to have to go to sleep at night in the Beis Medrash. The Efshter the Misrachesh Nisa, and maybe because of the Chasidus of Rav Acha, HaKadosh Baruch Hu do a nes, and he'll kill this dragon, this monster, this mazik. And that's exactly what happened. When Rav Acha Bar Yaakov came to this city, all bus, he came to sleep. Bahu Be'Rabbanan in that same Beis Medrash. V'idmei lei, the mazik appeared in front of Acha Kitanina de Shiva Reish Vose as a 7-headed monster. And Rav Acha was mispalel, and he bowed to Hashem to request of Hashem save him from the mazik. V'chol kriya dekara, every time Rav Acha bent down, he bowed in his tefillah. Nasar Chad Reisha, another one of the 7 heads, fell off. Till finally all 7 heads fell off, and Ois, the dragon was dead. Amalahu Rav Acha said the next day, Ilo Esrachish Nisa Sakninte. If not for the fact that God brought about a miracle, you put me into danger. That wasn't the right thing to do. We don't rely on a miracle. What happens if he has 2 mitzvahs? One is to study Torah, and that means he's going to have to go far away and learn in the yeshiva. He won't be able to get married. Or should he get married and start raising a family, and he'll postpone his Talmud Torah? The Brisa says, we're going to soon see that that's not always true, but the Brisa says that he should dedicate himself to Torah study and then get married. Because if he gets married first, there'll be Torah b'tzorchei beiso parnasoso, and he won't be able to study Torah in the proper way. But if he cannot succeed in learning Torah without getting married, his yetzer is getting the best of him. He can't focus on his Torah. Is then Isa Isha Yakach Yilmod Torah. Then first he should get married and then try to learn Torah. Again, it's not going to be easy to learn Torah once you're married, because you have to be Mefarnes HaMishpacha. Rav Yehuda B'Shmuel Locha, no say Isha Yakach Yilmod Torah. Yochanan, Rei Chaim B'Tzavar V'Yasek B'Torah. According to Shmuel, first he gets married, then he studies Torah. Rav Yochanan says that's not feasible, because when the Rei Chaim, to grind the wheat is going to be his obligation, because he's got to support his wife and then a mitzvah of his children, and v'yasok like b'Torah, and he could be osek b'Torah. How's that possible? Cute story they say about Reb Chaim Brisker and Reb Shimon Shkov, that they were once walking down the street, and Reb Chaim put his arm around Reb Shimon. So Reb Shimon said, Reb Chaim, v'tzavoro v'yasek b'Torah. Can we study Torah with Reb Chaim on my neck? Below Pligi, there's no machlok between Shmuel and Reb Yochanan. They're talking about 2 different mitzius. Halon v'halahu. Shmuel is talking about a person in Bavel. That's called Lon. And he said, no say Isha v'akak Torah, he can get married first. Why? Because what happened was they would ship off to learn Torah in Eretz Yisrael. And if they weren't here locally in Bavel, then the burden of Parnasa was not imposed upon them. They could actually, according to Shmuel, get married. And then by getting married, that will remove from them what we call the Hirhure Anfera, so he can learn Torah clearly. And he's going to go out to study Torah in Eretz Yisrael. And there he doesn't have the old Parnasa to distract him from his study of Torah. But Holahu, Rabbi Yochanan is referring to Eretz Yisrael. And he's saying, now, what it means is that the Bnei Eretz Yisrael would study Torah locally. They didn't go elsewhere to study Torah. And therefore, if they get married, they will have the all of Parnas on their shoulders, and there's no way that they can dedicate themselves freely to the study of Torah. Therefore, Rabbi Yochanan said he should study Torah first, and only afterwards he should marry. Rav Chizda was boasting to Rav Huna about the great Rav Hamnuna, the Anam Gadol. Amalei, Rav Huna said to Rav Chizda, when he comes around, send him over to me. I want to check out and see if he's such a great man like you described. Ki asa. And when Rav Hamnuna came, and Rav Chizda brought him to Rav Huna, Rav Hamnuna came. Is then what happened was Rav Huna noticed Chazi de lo Parasuji wasn't wearing a head covering. Now, a married man used to wear a head covering. He used to wear a sudar. And you'll see in many pictures from the old times that the men wore a sudar. So Rav Huna understood that Rav Hamnuna was not married. Amar le. So he turns to Rav Hamnuna and he says, my time below priest is sudar. Why aren't you wearing a sudar? Amar le telo nesivna. Because we only wear a sudar on our heads after marriage. I'm not married. I'm still a single buck. Adrinuli ape mine. Rav Huna turned his back to Rav Hamnuna. Amalei chazi telo chazis lahuli ape adesivis. I don't want you to show up in front of me until you get married. And this story is brought down here as a proof that it's very critical that a person get married and not postpone marriage. And the Gemara says that Kol Makabel Pnei Rabo Ki'ilu Makabel Pnei Shechina. So Rav Huna turned his face away from Rav Hamnuna to be merames to him that if you're not osik b'peri v'rivya, then you're gorim l'shechina shetistalik miYisrael. The Gemara brought in Yevamis Daf Samach Dal. As you know, I was a co-rabbi in the Amic Learning Center for about a decade. And unfortunately, there are a lot of single men there. And they should be learning this Gemara. Rav Huna l'tamei di omer ben esrim shana v'lo nasa isha kol yom v'avera. If a person's already 20 years old and he has not yet get married, he's living in Avera. The Gemara says, v'avera sal kedaitach. What does it mean? Is he having some sort of a free love relationship? No. All his days he's dreaming and fantasizing about an Avera. God sits there waiting patiently until the man is 20. Declares, let his bones crumble, so to speak. They should dry up and crumble. Why am I superior to other colleagues of mine, says Rav Chizda about himself? I got married at the age of 16. Had I got married 2 years earlier, at the ripe old age of 14 years old, which I was told that in Florida you could get a driver's license at 14, on the top of the flamin, I would have told the Satan, the Eitzahara, let the arrows fly into your eyes, meaning I would be miscarabo, and I would argue against the Yetzer Hara. He could not get the best of me. Okay, this is where we'll stop for today on the top of Daf Lamed Omid Aleph. Thank you very much, and have a great day.